reduce the amount of hardware that we have in the system by increasing our utilization rate for mobile pay using text to park. And this is just an outline of how it's going to work. So the way that I'm proposing that we set up this particular this system, the pay-by-plate system, is for every block face, there'll be a zone number. For every parking lot, there'll be a different zone number. For each street, each area of parking will have a different zone number. What that does for us from a management standpoint is it helps us to better understand utilization of the system. If we had one zone number for a quadrant or a whole street, or one zone number for all the surface lots and one zone number for all the on-street parking, we would not have a sense of the utilization of the entire system, a micro understanding of the utilization. So this gives us a micro understanding of the utilization of the system. Now, having said that, right now we do manual car counts, right? We need to get away from that from a management standpoint. It's time consuming. It's not the best use of our time. So pay-by-plate's going to help us better manage that aspect of our day-to-day operations.
Can you explain that a little, the manual car counts? Because I thought the specific license plate, or the specific spot number remove the manual car counts. So
Well,
are you referring to something?
no. So the specific space numbers give us like we can pull reports and we can identify utilization that way, but it's not as accurate as someone going throughout the lots at the specified times and counting the number of cars in the lots. And I'll give you an example. When we started talking, we have a parking study. We just had a parking study done. People who Fisherbeck did the parking study. They did the same exact. They're doing what we're doing, but they're just doing it in smaller time increments to make sure, so we can make sure that we understand what the utilization is at different times of the day, and this helps us to better understand that. So the space numbers are not as accurate as manually counting, and this will be more accurate than just space numbers, if that makes sense.
It doesn't, but
Okay.
I don't know how, I don't understand that. I'll just be honest. Because we pay for a spot. I don't know how you can't count that.
Well, no, we can count it, but you have to factor in also, one of the things that is not counted in that spot is monthly parkers. In each one of the lots, there are X amount of monthly parkers. When you pull a report, we don't know how many monthly parkers are in a lot at a given time.
Okay.
So in lot 3, for instance, we have 60 plus monthly parking spots. If we don't actually count the utilization, then we don't have a sense of if we don't actually count the way we're counting now, it skews the numbers because the monthly parkers skew the numbers.
Okay.
So through the chair, are you essentially saying that the monthly parkers are going to move to using the app to record where they are so that we have that paper trail? Or am I misunderstanding that?
Well, for right now, for right now, that won't change. The monthly parkers will still be set up in sections. In the DOT, they're on level 3 and above. having said that, though, it won't, transitioning to pay-by-plate won't impact that number significantly. But what it does is, when people park in a space, a person leaves, and somebody else comes and parks right behind them, then, our enforcement, if they don't pay for the space, our enforcement people don't know, and that skews the count as well. So, people piggybacking on someone else's space time is another issue that this helps resolve, because you have a unique plate credential, and the plate credential, you can't carry that with you anywhere. The space is paid for, but it's paid for with a specific plate. So if another vehicle's parked there, and it's not the plate that paid for the space, that person's going to get a ticket. It's going to skew our counts, because you had 2 cars parking there between 1 and 2 instead of 1, which would come up on a report. That makes sense.
Through the chair, I'd suggest, you're saying this is an added potential benefit. It's not the leading benefit.
Right.
So I think we can summarize this afterwards, but I'd suggest you move on with your focus.
Okay.
Okay, I know there's better data management, but it's confusing. But I hear you.
It's an operations.
Yes,
I think it's pretty in the weeds on the operations side.
okay.
Okay. So the infrastructure needed to make this system work, we're in the process right now of changing the keypads for all of the kiosks. It's approximately, these keypads run probably about 200, 250 a piece. We've got about 45 of them. It's not, we do that within our operational budget. What we do foresee happening as well is, the infrastructure, the amount of kiosks that we need, once we implement this, we think we'll be able to reduce the amount of hardware that we have out there right now. We think, next year, we probably will be able to reduce our hardware, the actual kiosks, by about 5 kiosks, and the year after that, about the same, maybe 4 kiosks is what we're projecting. And there's a savings associated with that, and I'll get to that in a minute. The new signage system-wide is one of the big things that we anticipate out of the benefits of this. Is the signage that we're going to get is provided by our payment solution provider. So it's not, it's not a budgetary, the actual hard physical signs are not coming out of DPW's budget, and they're not coming out of parking's budget. The service provider is going to provide those signs. The ratio of signs in a given footprint is 1 sign per 8 spaces, as opposed to 1 sign per 2 spaces. There's a cost savings there. And then the zone numbers and additional methods of payment are another one of the benefits here. So this is just to give you a little more detail, not to go too far in the weeds, but on the signs. So right now, we have about 800, almost 900 signs in our system. We think our plan is to reduce that to about 182 signs. So that carries across the whole system from a savings standpoint and a maintenance standpoint and a time standpoint. It's hard to estimate, that exact cost, but we think approximately $2,000 in annual repairs for signs. Those are signs that are already up. Those aren't for new signs. Those are for signs that are already up. And then, as I mentioned previously, we think we'll be able to reduce our hardware, our kiosk infrastructure by those numbers in 2024 and 2025. So, one of the discussions that we'll be having over the next month or the next 2 months is replacing the kiosks, all of the kiosks, or 40 out of 49 of them are at end of life. They've been in the system since we started, and I've submitted a CIP request to start the process for replacing those kiosks. But this helps us not to need to replace this. Transitioning to the system, we believe, helps us not to need to replace as many as we as we would have had if we don't transition to this system. So let me go back. So the challenges, some of the, I think the main challenge for transitioning to this system is simply transitioning from using a space number to a zone number. If we adequately sign the system, which I'm confident we would do, app users, for them, the transition will cause minimal change for them because all they're doing is entering a zone number. They've already got their license plate number in the app already. 60% of our transactions are mobile payments. So the impact to those people is going to be minimal. The impact to someone who is not familiar with the system is going to be the same as if you go to any city and you use mobile payment or you use a kiosk to pay for your parking. Simply meaning, there's a learning curve if you've never used a system before, no matter what system you use. So, we don't think that the transition is going to be problematic for current users, and we plan on communicating efficiently with businesses, communicating with the signage that we have to give instructions out there, with people adequate instruction to be able to make those payments without much, let's just say, thought process to it. If you visited some of those other places that I put on the screen before and you paid for parking, we just don't hear in this day and age that much pushback for using pay by plate amongst my peers in other places that I've done this. We just don't get that much pushback. It's just another piece of technology or another technology improvement. So, as we move forward, what we would do is coordinate, or what my department will do is coordinate with city communications and with the DDA to make sure that we get the word out about this transition. Included in our discussion with the DDA, and I don't think I've had a discussion with Jenny about this yet, but I will. What I'm proposing is we put together some business focus groups just to make sure that this rolls out, as seamlessly as possible. And right now, and I didn't say this earlier, but what our timeline for this is spring, sometime in March, hopefully, was the goal. I realize that Woodward Moves not being on schedule could impact this. We don't want to do anything that's too disruptive to the whole system. So, there's not a hard, fast date on when we need to do this, but we'd like to do it in the spring. And I think the key points here, the big one where I'm confident that the transition will be easy for most people, current users of the app specifically, because you're transitioning from one sign to another sign, from a space number to a zone number. I do plan to give the DDA a presentation at their next meeting. And, here's where I officially say, Jenny, we're looking for a business focus group to, move this thing along obviously with council's approval. So, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll open it up for council for questions.
Through the chair? I have several.
Okay.
So first of all, I remember, and I know Mayor Piana remembers, the
Transition day?
the winter of our discontent, when the original system was installed. It was installed in the middle of February on like a Friday afternoon with a snowstorm, and people were very, very upset because it was downtown wide and there was no communication. And I know that you've already talked about doing a big communication plan, which is fantastic. Is the intent on doing this across the entire downtown all at once? Or, as I would suggest, maybe starting with Woodward and 9 Mile spaces, and then maybe a week later, do the, few outer lots, smaller outer lots, and then maybe, the next weekend do the rest of the lots, just to give people a chance to become accustomed of the change. And I know that this is a much smaller change than it was when we implemented, when we went from meters to this, the current system, but I worry about the backlash again.
Well, I have to, Councilman, I have to tell you that Joe has made sure that I'm well aware on several occasions of, the issues that have happened in the past regarding the implementation of parking in Ferndale. And your suggestion, I think is almost going to be necessary, because it's going to be too hard. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be feasible for us to just do it all in 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. I think a rollout by section is going to be necessary. And, when that happens from an operation standpoint, we will also be talking to people, kind of more lenient than we usually are, to make sure that it gets implemented without, as painless as possible. So, yes, to your question, I think we can phase this in, not all at once, and I'll be happy to share the schedule as we get that developed.
That's a great question.
Thank you. My second question is regarding the app and using the license plate. Now, if I recall, when it was first rolled out, we used to use our license plate. Like, you would create an app profile and you could add several license plates to your profile. And when you parked, you just picked whichever car you were parking with, and then you paid it and you went on your way.
You will still be able to do that.
Okay.
You can still, in your app, you can still list multiple vehicles.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Do the zones have to be 5-digit? I mean, it's hard enough to remember 4 digits. Now you're asking, because I was just basing it on the display. You had
Yeah.
5-digit zones.
I have been to other cities that use 4 digits. Those were just examples.
Okay.
Let me,
Honestly, 2 digits would be great.
so there is something that I have seen. I'm not sure. Let me clarify that. Let me get clarification on that.
Okay.
Can the digits be less than 5?
Yeah.
You can use some of these apps that with some of these national brands like the one we have that do this, and you'll punch in 404, and 404 it may ask you 404 in Ferndale, 404
okay.
in Arkansas, in Pine Bluff, so I need to figure out if we can make that, kind of streamline. What I don't want to do is give the customer more clicks than they have to have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can someone who uses the app, let's say that they pay for 4 hours, they're expecting to be someplace in 4 hours, but after 30 minutes or so, they decide that, they have to leave. Is there any way that they can get the remaining time refunded or credited?
Well, I recall an option for that with a prior mobile payment provider. I'm not sure if this one does that or not. That's another thing I need to check on. It has been done. So, yeah, I need to check on that too. Part of the discussion there is, part of what I'm thinking about is, so when let's just say, for instance, it's a credit card transaction, which it would have to be for this to work. Not a coin transaction when you put coins in the machine, but for the app, one of the questions becomes, when does the actual transaction occur, right? Is it upon selecting the amount of time, or is it at the end of a session?
Yeah.
And I think we're set up to do it at the end of a session so people can extend their time if need be, but that's another question I need to come back with, okay?
And my last question, is the system, because we're using license plates now, and you're going to be able to enter the license plate at the kiosk, not necessarily use an app, will it be tied to any system that would let or alert us to know if there was stolen plates or a stolen vehicle?
So our LPR system is set up, the license plate recognition system that we have for enforcement.
Yeah.
Is set up, can be set up to alert PD if there's a stolen vehicle, or if there's
Or an
anything,
alert, like if there's an Amber Alert?
anything, yeah, that PD has in their system. That's a coordination issue that we need to work out. But I don't think that it's on the payment side of the equation where we can do that. I think it's only on the enforcement side of the equation. I'm fairly certain of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Open it up for other questions from council. I really appreciate this presentation. I'm a frequent user of Detroit's parking app, and this is the similar back end. We use the same system, it just looks different branded app. The 3-digit zones is primo. If you can get to 3, that would be great. More than 2, but not 5. So sounds like a good compromise to me. So I really look forward to advancing the system. We've already paid for it, right? This is just an update and
Yeah.
presentation, right?
Well, this doesn't cost us anything.
I know, but the council's already approved this, right?
Oh,
The hardware.
Correct, yeah.
Hardware, yes, this is just an update.
We're setting our flag to
Yes.
start our implementation communications, and the DDA will be next, and our focus groups.
Yeah, we still have scars from the original move over from the coined operated to our first mobile app experience. I don't know, what year was that, Joe?
2013.
10 years ago, and we basically told Joe to fix it at the time. So we just keep doing continuous improvement and advancing and improving the experience and making it easier as the technology unfolds itself.
yes, ma'am.
So I really appreciate your presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And never, ever do parking updates during a polar vortex.
Dude, they're small.
Thank you.
That's what we learned.
All right.
All right, that concludes our presentations for tonight. I'm going to move on to call to audience, and I invite folks to come up to the podium and say what's on your mind for 3 minutes, following our mindfulness clock here. And who would like to start off first tonight? Hi, Prasad. Good to
Hello.
see you.
Good to see you all. I'm here to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Recently, a number of scholars of Holocaust and genocide studies in the United States signed an open letter in which they cautioned that the current war in Israel-Palestine is being used to, quote, portray Israel's collective punishment of Gaza as a battle for civilization in the face of barbarism, thereby promoting racist narratives against Palestinians, end quote. What such rhetoric does is that separates out the inhumane brutality of the current conflict that was started by Hamas's terrorist attacks of October 7th and escalated by Israeli terror against the people of Gaza, from the ever-deteriorating spiral of violence brought on by 75 years of displacement, 56 years of Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, and 16 years of the Gaza blockade. We are in a crisis of unimaginable and horrifying scale. In Gaza, over 14,000 Palestinians, including at least 6,000 children, have been killed. 1.5 million have been placed under siege with their homes, schools, hospitals, and other places destroyed, and a desperate lack of safe drinking water, food, fuel, and health care. Even as I rejoice in the release of hostages and prisoners in the past few days, on both sides, the current pause and truce will do nothing to reduce the trauma of war and destruction. What voices of peace across the globe are calling for is an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the release of all hostages and political prisoners, and the support for peace over violence, justice over oppression, and an end to the vicious cycles of violence that can only be arrested by a political solution. As Dr. Omar Bartov, one of the signatories to that letter and one of the most world-renowned Holocaust historians, said, there is no military solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Ferndale can and should join these voices for peace and call for a permanent ceasefire. To rush desperately needed humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza who are being starved by the Israeli siege, and to end U.S. complicity in sustaining the Israeli military occupation of the occupied territories. We need to center humanity, and we need to join those voices that are calling for peace in the Middle East. And I think Ferndale has an opportunity to do so. It fits well with the values of our city. And I think, as my colleagues here will also say, friends will say, it's time to call for a permanent ceasefire.
Hi, good evening, Angela.
Hello, my name is Angela Lepard. I live on East Breckenridge in Ferndale. I am here to ask for Ferndale City Council to pass a ceasefire resolution that would call for, 1, an immediate and durable ceasefire to the ongoing war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the West Bank. 2, the safe release of all hostages and political prisoners. And 3, an unhindered supply and delivery of humanitarian aid. Over 15,000 Palestinians have been killed, including over 6,200 children. In Palestine, there are over 38,000 injured, over 6,800 missing. That is from what the news sources can estimate since Gaza's health system has collapsed. There are 1.7 million in refugee camps, 58 journalists dead, not to speak of the journalists' families that were targeted and killed. When Russia bombed hospitals, schools, and churches in the Ukraine, we cited Russia for a human rights violation. There have been nearly 300,000 residential units, educational facilities, houses of worship damaged or destroyed in Gaza. 26 of the 38 hospitals are not functioning. Why does it matter if it's a U.S. ally committing genocide? Why aren't we saying more since the U.S. is funding the destruction and has continued to commit billions? The city of Ferndale is supposed to be committed, a community dedicated understanding inequities, power dynamics, systemic and systematic oppression, and our responsibilities to the larger community and world. I'm asking the Ferndale City Council to reflect our community values by approving a ceasefire resolution. The resolution not only communicates we stand in solidarity with any vulnerable and marginalized community, the resolution will also communicate what the people of Ferndale expect from our elected officials at all levels of government. One of those officials being Haley Stevens, someone most of you have a relationship with, and someone who has been lobbied to stay quiet. With the limited time I have, a few things to understand. A ceasefire is not mutually exclusive with supporting different marginalized communities. In fact, a large number of brown, black, Jewish, queer, disabled, and other community are advocating for a ceasefire. A pause is not enough. The jailing of Palestinian children, the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian people did not start in October. I encourage you to follow Palestinian journalists on the ground in Gaza for a reality check. There really is no excuse for us not following through on this bare minimum request. I ask that you please be on the right side of history.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, good evening.
Hi. All right, my name is Heidi West, 493 Pearson, Ferndale. I'm a 14-year resident of Ferndale, and I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So, a mom, a teacher, PTA member in our public schools, and a precinct delegate. I'm active in our community. I've met most of you through different forms of activism. I have a son here tonight in the Ferndale Public Schools. I'm hoping we'll be quiet for a little longer. I believe in this community. My family moved here from Detroit 13 years ago because I knew Ferndale to be a welcoming, diverse, liberal, and progressive community. I know that City Council is accepting of all viewpoints and is anti-violence in many ways. Ferndale's declared National Gun Violence Awareness Day because of the 100 people killed by gun violence in this country, and it affects our community. I'm here to say that the situation in Gaza is a genocide. As has been stated already by my colleagues, over 13,000 human beings have been killed in just over 1 month. Over half are women and children. It's not a war when one side clearly has the military and financial advantage. To kill civilians, mothers, babies, over half of the dead are under 5. They say they're trying to destroy Hamas. But I ask you, City Council, would you bomb Ferndale Elementary School if there was a mass shooter inside? Of course you wouldn't. But that's the logic they're using to justify this extinction of an entire community. I implore you, Ferndale City Council, to be on the right side of history. History will prove Israel to be guilty of war crimes. Already every humanitarian agency and the UN is calling it that. Imagine what you would have done during the Civil Rights Movement, during the Vietnam War, and other atrocities. That's what you're doing now. Many of us are old enough to have taken a stand during apartheid in South Africa and stood with the South African black community and Nelson Mandela. Mandela said Palestine is the exact situation, and none of us are free until they are free. They're being displaced and killed with no water, no food. It's inhumane, and I can't believe in 2023 that we're afraid to say this. This is our chance to prove to our community, that includes our Muslim brothers and sisters, that we will speak up during times of injustice. Be brave, be the first, and show surrounding communities that we can be the first Metro Detroit suburb that is not majority Muslim, that we are allies, that we say no more to this murder, and call for a permanent ceasefire resolution now, like Detroit, Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck. Lastly, I just read a poll that said 60% of Americans support this and 80% of Democrats. So you can imagine Ferndale is probably going to stand behind you in time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hi there, good evening. Good to see you. Welcome back.
Yeah, Dennis Augustin, 1550 Spencer. See, I got a couple of things here. You know, we have these parking issues and that, going on during the middle of winter and leaf pickup and that. You know, a one-time investment of signs on each and every street corner is a large investment, but it'd be a one-time one. And speaking as a contractor who traveled around a lot of different cities around here, I have been asked to leave the streets because there was no parking on those streets. Okay? And that, and I mean, Hazel Park, we all know how bad Hazel Park was at one time financially. Yet those people abide by the signs that are posted there. And their streets are clear when it comes to garbage pickup and leaf pickup. And granted, now they do the bag stuff. Now that's true. But, they don't have no problem with it. They did this when they were financially strapped. Ferndale has never been like that. Made some smart moves, Ferndale did years ago. Made them financially sound. Okay? And I just don't understand why Ferndale hasn't done this. A couple years back when we had some snowstorms and we put it out that, people had to get off the streets during these snowstorms, and I believe there were some signs put up, and that it worked on my street. Because the ones that got caught the second time, they weren't there the third time. They didn't like paying those $100 fines and that. But my street was never so clean as when this stuff happened. And I just don't understand why this city doesn't invest like that, a one-time investment. Polika, you've been up there the longest. These signs will still be there when you go and retire, and if you want to stick around another 20 more years on city council, But that, I mean, I just don't understand that. Why doesn't the city do an investment like that, especially when, we're talking about pension cuts, police and fire, our city people works, Now I noticed there's been some new officers hired in, but a lot of old timers have left. People, police officers that grew up in this city, knew the city, okay? And that they have left, gone someplace else or retired, been put into retirement, so to speak, okay? With these pension cuts and all these new townhouses or condos going up, there should be lots of tax dollars here for this city to be able to do something like that. Okay, whether it be residential or commercial, who's ever owns those buildings, okay, that tax dollar should be going to work for us and make things a lot easier so the police, the fire, and the DPW can get up and down these streets and keep them clean and safe. Okay, because I've watched the DPW guys when they're during the winter months go just like this. They threw their hands up because they couldn't get a plow down the street.
Thank you, Dennis, for your comments. Thanks for being here. Is there anybody else who would like to put comment up tonight? I just want to remind folks that we have a financial task force underway right now reviewing our city finances, and all of that information about the city's taxes and financial position is all available and up and being discussed by this task force, and encourage folks to go learn about how our tax dollars are used and restrained by state shared revenue, Headley, and Prop A as well. All right, so we are now moving on to our consent agenda, and I'll read it in entirety, and council can do their bidding with a motion. All right. 7A, approval of the November 13th, 2023 meeting minutes. 7B, approval to renew a pawnbroker's license to be located at 1461 East 8 Mile Road, to be held by the Audbury Group, Motor City Pawnbrokers 3, and approval of 2 surety bonds, each in the amount of $1,500. 7C, approval of the listed appointments and reappointments to city boards and commissions. 7D, approval of street safety improvements proposed at Livernois Avenue and Oak Ridge Street by Nationwide Construction Group for $9,000. 7E, approval of resolution appointing Director of Public Works James Jamison as streets administrator. 7F, approval of the Ferndale Police Department to auction and dispose of lost and abandoned property via property room in accordance with local ordinance number 114, 7-10-29 and state law. 7G, approval of the creation of the police communications liaison position. 7H, approval of the independent contractor agreement with Mark Booth for mechanical and plumbing plan review and inspection services. 7I, approval to renew interlocal agreement with Oakland County for the provision of IT services. 7J, approval of the independent contractor agreement with Paul Cronk for electrical plan review and inspection services. 7K, approval of the independent contractor agreement with Michigan Plan Review and Consulting LLC for plan review services. And 7L, approval of bills and payrolls as submitted by the finance director and subject to review by the council finance committee. What is the pleasure of council?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Leaks May.
Polika.
Yes.
Leaks May.
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes, and that is approved unanimously. Moving on to our regular agenda items. We have two this evening. The first one is 8A, consideration to adopt the City of Ferndale Capital Improvement Plan 2025 through 2030. And presenting tonight is Venezia. Thank you.
Good evening. Alrighty. As stated, I'm Denicia, assistant to the city manager, and I'll be giving a brief presentation on this year's capital improvement plan process for the fiscal years 25 through 30. Sorry, y'all. So I want to start off with just acknowledging our 2023 CIP policy team. Their perspectives added a lot of value to the process, so I wanted to highlight some of the expertise offered by the team. So we have our DPW Director, James Jameson, adding his infrastructure expertise. We have our Deputy City Clerk, Dave Movilla, offering his GIS asset mapping and record maintenance expertise. We also have Emmanuel Johnson, our Recreation Manager, adding his community and neighborhoods perspective. And we have Riley Coleman adding her engagement perspective, Christine Ross making sure that we aligned with the master land use plan. And our newest face, Armand Sims, our administrative accountant, adding her fiduciary expertise here. And then we also have our elected and appointed officials. We have Mayor Pro Tem James on the team, as well as Councilmember Polika, serving as our policy setters and our budget approvers. And then we had Krista Azar from the Planning Commission also helping us align with the MLUP. So I just want to say thank you to the team. You guys really help cultivate and continue a seamless process. And I wanted to say, if our former assistant city manager, Kyle Paulette, is watching, I just want to say thank you. I got a chance to watch you mold this process from the beginning in 2019 when we both started, and it's been an honor to walk in your footsteps. So thank you for all of your leadership. Moving on, you may wonder, what is a capital improvement project? Well, our policy definitions remain the same this year. So a CIP is anything that is a large purchase, so a building or equipment over $10,000, or strategic planning over $25,000. And something new that we've kind of been seeing creep up lately is technology equipment maintenance and upgrades. So as technology prices increase, we'll probably see more of that. So where do the funds come from? So it can come from bonds, Act 51, Sanitation Fund, Drug Forfeiture Fund, CDBG, Water and Sewer Fund, Auto Parking Fund, and the General Fund, which funds the listed city departments. So the CIP marks the beginning of the budget year with major capital planning, and having our capital priorities understood helps us shift swiftly into budget preparation. So we start off in September, where departments can submit their project applications. And then moving into October, the CIP policy team reviews these applications through an interview process with each department to determine clarity and priority for each project. Then in November, the first draft goes to the Planning Commission, and that happened on November 15th. And the Planning Commission approves, and then we come to council, which is why we're here tonight. So December through January, we have our mid-year budget adjustment, and then February through May, we'll be looking at budget prep and adoption for fiscal year 25. So continuing last year's precedent, last year the CIP policy team added a 6th year to the CIP in an effort to align with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation's redevelopment ready communities requirements. And so we wanted to make sure that we aligned with that again this year. So we kept that 6th year. Also continuing with last year's precedent and last year's CIP update, the policy team wanted to have a ranking system that was objective and not based on the desires of the departments. So we previously tried a must-have, should-have, could-have approach. And then we also tried asking whether a project plans to expand or maintain a program. But the CIP policy team looked at using the Master Land Use Plan Update Plan Ferndale and the evaluation questions. And we saw that they established a criteria of values that we could attach to each project. And so we saw also that this helped to level the playing field for departments whose programs aren't as prioritized as other departments. And we'll look at that a little bit more in detail in the next slide. Some projects did fall into multiple categories, but for those, we just chose the value that most closely aligns with the intent of the project. So for here, you see an example for PD hybrid vehicles, which you may think would fall under sustainable, but the main purpose is to provide public safety. So it was assigned a healthy value instead. Also continuing scoring with PBB this year, our program-based budgeting. So every department operation is a part of a program, and each program is ranked based on these 5 criteria listed here. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, you can see how a department like Parks and Rec may have a lower priority based on these criteria than fire and EMS would. And so that's why we liked having both the Plan Ferndale evaluation questions included with the PBB scoring. So this slide shows a historical view of spending out of our capital accounts from the last 5 years, but I want to bring your attention to the middle graph here with the green, which shows the effort that the city made to cut costs during the pandemic and deferring facility capital until both the facilities condition assessment was completed and the facilities task force recommendations were made. And speaking to those recommendations, one of them called for divestment from the Kulik Center due to the exorbitant costs and ownership issues associated with caring for a building that was deteriorating. And that was approved by council in September of last year. And so the task force also recommended the addition of an indoor-outdoor recreation facility to restore some of the needs that the Kulik Center held for the community. And this project has already secured $2 million in grant funding. So taking a deeper dive into that recommendation, the task force recommended that the facility should expand public restroom facilities for the park, offer a concession experience to complement the new splash pad and the athletic fields, include a multi-purpose recreation space, as I mentioned, to replace some of those lost uses from the Kulik Center, and also provide office and storage space for the Parks and Rec staff who we know are currently working out of Incubizo. And the example here is from Belade Park, located on the Detroit riverfront. And this facility would face similar NDNR restrictions that the Martin Road Park facility would encounter as well, which prohibit the construction of an indoor-only facility. So you can see the Martin Road Park facility in the CIP number 628, and the potential cost for the facility is expected to be $7 million. The first $2 million of spending will be funded through grants that city staff secured. So that's here in fiscal year 25 and 26. And the next $5 million could be spent through a 20-year, $5 million bond. And this would result in $450,000 annual debt service payments that would need to be supported by the general fund. You can see that starting here in fiscal year 27. These graphs are from last year's presentation, but I wanted to keep them to highlight how the Facilities Task Force recommendations are slated to decrease capital spending on facilities over time, especially considering the Kulik Center here, where we can see almost $4 million will be saved from divesting. And just for clarity, the chart on the left here reflects the capital needs for our current facilities and not new facilities that would need to be bonded for. The next Facilities Task Force recommendation would be to replace Fire Station 2 with a combined public safety headquarters, which, if constructed, would consolidate fire headquarters, police headquarters, and dispatch into one single facility, and could address health concerns like for our firefighters who are currently living in spaces above existing vehicle bays, serious space deficiencies, employee workspace inequities, like our female police and fire employees, and design constraints, and reduce long-term costs of ownership by consolidating common uses. And it's also recommended to include a space for an election precinct to serve this area as well. The photo here is from the task force report, in which we look at a combined public safety facility in Wells, Maine. But some other examples of joint public safety headquarters in Michigan could be looked at in Grayland, Kalamazoo, and Detroit. So you can also see the public safety headquarters in the CIP under number 629. And so the financing related to this would require the city to acquire the Comerica Bank property and parking lot that border the existing Fire Station 2. So the land acquisition is here in fiscal year 25. And then in fiscal year 26 would be the design for the building. And the potential costs for a new police and fire headquarters is expected to be a $25 million bond to be repaid over a 30-year term at 5% interest. And you can see that starting here in fiscal year 27. This image here is from Winter Park, Florida, which is a sample comparably sized city that helped us estimate these costs. And their population is 29,000. And also, police and fire would recommend an experienced public safety architecture and engineering firm to refine costs, should council and the finance committee recommend pursuing this option in place of funding repairs for existing facilities. So as I mentioned, this is our timeline. If we adopt the CIP tonight, then we move into mid-year budget adjustment, and in February through May with budget prep and adoption, this will be used as a policy piece and a talking point for council. So with that, any discussion or questions?
Open up to council.
I have no questions.
Well, you were on the committee, so that makes sense. I just really appreciate everybody's hard work. Every year there's improvements, and you can see it from the strategic planning process and where we're going, particularly with our facilities, pulling that through with the Financial Task Force Committee. I see that work being incorporated into the CIP, and so I think that's just really fantastic work by the team, being thoughtful of how to update and make it relevant again for this year. I am curious, do you know why MEDC expanded the CIP from 3 years to 6 years?
Through the chair, no, I don't know that I understand the added
Longevity
benefit.
of that? Yeah.
We can follow up on that. I just know that it's a new standard and we're a member, so we try to meet the standard.
Yes, I know. I helped start redevelopment ready communities, and I'm walking off this council. I still hope this city will remain in it, because there's value and we get grant money out of it. So, okay. I really didn't have any questions per se. I mean, they were just about per like items, but that was in 2026 and 2027. That could change annually. And I know that this is projected off of a Headley renewal of 2024, correct?
Well, through the chair, actually, I'll take that opportunity to just make a couple closing points to the viewing audience. One, this is a capital improvement plan, so none of these things are actionable. The goal of the capital improvement plan is for the city to forecast its long-term asset needs, and doing so makes us a more prepared city. It also makes council and city more aligned with intention going into the budget process. Because after this, we will move into budget in the spring, and department capital requests should align with these initiatives that they've submitted during the capital plan. So it's all just making sure that we are more aligned and more strategic and more long-term thinking in our financial management of the city. So I do want to just make that point, and it gets updated every year. So as it's adopted today, some of these numbers are numbers such as the debt service example schedules, and it's just an example. It's there as an illustration of potential capital needs moving forward. Ultimately, that gets determined through the budget process, what is and is not funded or what is and is not prioritized at a given year. And so next fall, we'll have probably more information about those facilities. We'll have more input from the Finance Committee, and we'll have more information and input from the City Council vis-a-vis the public at that point. And then the numbers get refined. And that's one thing I love about this, is we have an opportunity to just refresh it and make it more current on an annual basis.
I really love that the checklist from the master plan is up front and center this time around, as a way to evaluate whether or not it's going to meet our goals and our climate goals, our community goals in the master plan, but our climate goals as identified by our residents and the climate action plan. High expectations and always hard pressed every year when the council budgets goes through the budget cycle of strategic planning and budgeting, of weighing all of these different factors and hard choices ahead. And we say that every year, but next year is particularly difficult for this council to navigate budget choices ahead.
I would like to make a comment, Mayor, if I may. So I do want to give praise to Denicia for leading the team. I know she mentioned Kyle, and Kyle developed the process, but I always say that you can have a great process, but if you don't have a strong leader keeping the team on task and on track, it doesn't matter how good the process is. So I appreciate all the work that you've done in keeping us to very short meetings, so. Thank you.
Excellent. With that, we would need a motion to proceed with this plan.
I move to adopt the City of Ferndale Capital Improvement Plan 2025 to 2030 as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Mikulski.
Polika,
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
Leaks May,
Yes.
Kiana.
Yes, and that is approved unanimously. And now we're moving on to our last item under the regular agenda. It is 8B, is consideration to establish a neighborhood enterprise zone at 1200 West 9 Mile Road.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Let me pull this up.
right, as the mayor mentioned, this is the consideration to establish a neighborhood enterprise zone at 1200 West 9 Mile Road. Just a couple slides kind of covering what we covered previously with a little bit of new information. Why are we here? To consider approving the NEZ for the developer to fund affordable units along with some other community benefits. So a little timeline here. This project's been going on for about a year and a half now. In March of 2022, they came before the Planning Commission as a discussion item to see Planning Commission's thoughts on their project. They submitted an application subsequently and were seen by the Planning Commission on April 27th, 2022, where they tabled the item, the developer tabled the item to improve it yet again. On May 28th, 2022, they came before the Planning Commission and the item was approved. The developer then went and looked at their project a little bit more in depth and actually wanted to come back and increase some of the units, a little bit of the square footage, and some of the parking spaces. So they presented a new plan on December 2nd, 2022, where it received, my memory is unanimous approval. The incentive committee has met twice on the project, on the neighborhood enterprise zone request, on July 12th and August 7th. And then if you recall, we came before the city council on September 25th with the public hearing for the NEZ. If you recall, the public hearing is part of the state statutes where we get to introduce it, but we cannot make a decision. We have to come back to a subsequent meeting and then present it. So we've had the public hearing, and now this is for council to actually consider the neighborhood enterprise zone district. So just to orientate you a little bit, here's a view from 9 Mile. It's on the north side of 9 Mile, west of Pinecrest. So this is the subject site. A little bit of an overview. And then backed out a little bit. You can see on the very corner, northeast corner, the Savvy Sliders, in the Vineyard Church is right here, parking lot. And this is just west of that. So the public hearing must be held within 45 days of noticing, but a decision cannot be made until 60 days after the noticing. It was published in the Oakland Press and Daily Tribune. It was sent to all taxing jurisdictions and sent to all property owners within 300 feet. There were a number of other non-financial obligations of the developer. A couple of them were to acknowledge at lease signing. The tenant would acknowledge that it is an affordable unit and the expiration date. It does require the developer to give an annual report to the city, making sure that they're complying with the agreement. It does include a requirement to notify the tenants 5 years before expiration, and then every year that the units will be expiring so they can plan ahead. There is a requirement that they meet with the CED director at the 3-year mark and then 2 and 1 year mark of the expiration. So we can see if there's other things that can be done to extend the affordability at that time. And then there's an acknowledgement that the NEZ can be revoked. So they will submit a revocation letter that we will keep on file, and then if at any point during the process they do not adhere to what they were going to do, we give them notice, and if they don't respond, we can submit the letter and revoke the NEZ. So a little bit of numbers here. So the current taxes, city portion, we collect about $154,000 over the 15 years. For all taxing jurisdictions, it's $385,000. That's if it stayed status quo. The taxes, if we did not have the NEZ, would be, city portion would be $1 million over 15 years. For all taxing jurisdictions, it would be $2.5 billion. The taxes we will be collecting, if it is in an NEZ, is estimated at $521,000 for the city, or $1.3 million for all taxing jurisdictions. So you can see, even with the NEZ, the city will be collecting about $370,000 more revenue than we would if it stayed in its current state. Councilors asked earlier about the AMI, so I put together a table of that. What is 50%, 60%, and 80% AMI? So 50% for a one-person household is about $33,000 a year, or $15.94. 60% AMI is about $19.13 per hour on a 40-hour work week, and 80% AMI is $25.50. 100% area median income is currently about $66,000 a year. What would that equate to for rent? Well, on a one-bedroom, at 50% AMI, rent would be $828. At 60%, it would be $994, and at 80%, it would be $1,326. If there's any questions, just stop me. Just a couple more slides. How many units will be affordable? So total number of units are 56 per the city's inclusionary housing policy. If they are to receive an incentive, 25% of the units must be affordable, so that's 14. So that means that 6 of the units will be affordable at 80%, 6 will be affordable at 60%, and 2 will be affordable at 50%. Just a quick site plan, if anyone has any questions, overview. 9 miles to your south, running east-west, and then you can see the building in the dark gray, and then the building cantilevers over some of the parking, and then there's some open space parking to the north. Couple renderings, couple color renderings. And that sums up staff's presentation. The applicant is here, developer's here if you have any questions, but I'm happy to give any perspective.
Thank you, Roger, for this presentation, and I believe this is the end of the road approval that would enable construction to begin.
Yeah, so this is the council designating the district, and then they have to come through and get a certificate that then will be given, I think, to the tax tribunal. We were talking today about what that process is. I think it might be a formality that if the district's approved, they will give us some documents, we will sign off, and then the assessor will take it from there to issue that certificate. But we might have to come back to council to issue the certificate, but this is really the meat and potatoes, creating the district.
Okay, and this is the end of the road with the planning commission, no more going back to the planning commission, so as it's outlined in the memo here, this has been a very long process, over a year-long process, and so coming to the punctuation point. What is the point I'm trying to make?
The developer can answer that.
Mayor,
That
if
is
I
my hope.
could, there is one other item. In addition to consideration of creating the neighborhood enterprise zone, there also in your material is the proposed neighborhood enterprise zone agreement that has been negotiated with the developer. And the motion, should council decide to proceed forward, would be, in addition to establishing the neighborhood enterprise zone, to also be to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the neighborhood enterprise zone agreement.
Writing that down. Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions from council to Roger.
If I may, through the chair, this is probably an informational question, probably for the developer. So I saw the different AMIs. Thank you for being diverse in that area. What will be the process? For example, an individual comes in at, who is going to vet the AMI process? As far as the application, how do you know? I mean, what if that situation changes down the line? I just wanted some questions for clarity.
It's a great question. So through any rental application, there's income verification, there's a credit check, there's a bunch of other stuff that you have to go through to actually apply and to be granted or awarded an apartment. So with the income restricted apartments, they have to hit an income ceiling, and that's how you qualify for an apartment unit. So when the property manager is going through applications for these, because we're going to be marketing these through specific programs, they'll see this person makes $45,000, they qualify for X, and if everything else checks out, they can approve that application.
Through the chair, how does that square with our policy about Section 8 housing? No income discrimination. I mean, if we're asking about income, do you also take into account Section 8 vouchers?
That's a really good question. I have to check with Mishta on that because Mishta is also involved in the project with incentives. So I have to check with him on that. It's a very good question. We do take Section 8 vouchers at another apartment building in Ferndale, and it hasn't been a problem, so.
So if you do have, if you are required to take them through MISTA, you already have a process on how to manage that.
Right.
Through the chair, even if you're not required to take them through MISTA, do we, since we have a policy of no income discrimination, we would require that, correct? I don't even know who I'm asking this question to, looking around
It's a
the
very
room.
good question, and I don't know the answer myself, but I think
We can get an answer, but I generally think when someone applies, they're going to let the management company know they have a voucher, and the voucher, they're going to look at and make sure it's good for the time frame. And I'm assuming they will take that off the rent. So say they have a $600 voucher on an $800 rent, they will take that as guaranteed income. Then they will need to have income to prove the other $200 that they can support that. So I'm sure they'll take it into consideration and take it right off the top of the rent. And then in the follow-up to the question about following up to make sure they're rented, that is what the annual report is for. So I know other communities kind of just approve these, and then the developer is off to, follow the rule as they've agreed to it, my understanding is. That's why we created the annual report. So every year they're going to give it to us, and in there is how many units are you renting, at what rent rate, so we can make sure they're being taken advantage of. The affordable units are being taken advantage of, used. And then I think there is a condition in there, maybe for
5A. Through the chair, Roger's referencing 5A, we negotiated the right to audit the developer's records regarding the affordable units, and they agreed to that.
Yeah, and I think there's another provision that if they don't, though, they owe us the difference between the affordable rent and the market rent. I think there's a condition in there, right, Dan, for that?
If I may, through the chair, is there then, I know that we will have our annual report, but will there be then an annual application process or procedure for the individuals? Sometimes income fluctuates, it goes down, it goes up.
Renewal?
A renewal.
I think they can answer that. Sometimes it's on autopilot, so if you're paying and then it rolls over, sometimes they don't question, but then sometimes they might actually require the person to submit updated documentation.
Yeah, the process is really simple. They re-upload all their documents, make sure there's no criminal history with that as well. And then they just sign a new lease.
Through the chair, who receives the annual report?
The CD director, the city in general, but it might have my contact information or the CD director's
I
contact
can pester
information.
you about it.
Sure.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
I was actually quite impressed that the annual report was actually drafted and included in this package, and so thank you for doing that up front and setting expectations at the outset, because I have not seen that in a development package before.
Yeah, I think it'll be slightly modified. It's illustrative. The developer wanted to work on it later, but I said it had to be in the packet as an exhibit.
I appreciate that, because now we know what we're going to expect, and I appreciate Ferlito really committing to that. I know reporting is arduous, but we're really trying to provide housing for everybody in our city.
Through the chair, one last question. Am I right in, I just did the math on 50% AMI and 60% AMI. Are all of these just under the 30% rent-to-income ratio?
Unless HUD has a special rule, it's likely they probably all are. That's generally how it's considered.
That's great.
Yeah. But I'm assuming yes.
That's how I calculate it, 30%.
Okay,
Nothing more.
perfect.
If I may, it's more of a comment, not a question, but I wanted to say thank you to Ferlito and Roger for negotiating community benefits. I know that has been a process, so that we felt like we were getting a fair deal with the incentive that we were extending this development. And I think we've come to some interesting and unique outcomes here based off of your neighbors as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing how those investments that you're making in these community benefits, the outcomes and results of that over time. So,
And I didn't speak to any of that. I figured skip that, but if you want to talk about the community benefits, I'm happy to talk about any of the specifics.
could you just do a quick recap of how we approach community benefits right now? What our process is?
Yeah, sure. So I think so. It's really just numbers. So when a developer comes to us and asks, an example is an NEZ, I'd like to have an NEZ. The first thing we have to do is compute what that savings is to the development, and that's done through computing what the assessment will be of the project once it's built. So we work with the assessor to figure out it'll be a $5 million property. It'll pay $100,000 in taxes per year. Over 15 years, that's $1.5 million. So we compute what would the savings be to the developer. And then we, as per our policy, you have to do affordable housing. So then we compute what is the cost for the developer to provide that affordable housing. What is the market rate they could get? What is the affordable rent that they're locked in at? And what is that loss in revenue to them? And then multiply that by the number of units times the number of years. And then you will get what the cost to the developer is. In our two examples, the one for 141 Vester and this one, there was a delta, meaning the developer was getting more of a value of the NEZ than the affordable was providing, probably like 60%. So in that case, we went to the developers to say, you know, what other community benefits would you like to help with the community? Because we don't desire to give you a 40% benefit for doing 60%, return on an incentive. So each development we've worked separately on what those community benefits would be. So for this one, it's additional streetscape improvement, it's additional landscaping, art for the parks, some food bank items. So we've computed what those things are, and then we add that in to figure out how closer are we to the incentive, understanding that the developer is not going to do it probably to break even while taking the risk. So we do leave a little bit for them. So in this case, I think it computed to the developers getting $100,000 of true benefit, doing about $873,000 or something in affordable rents, and then maybe like $270,000 in community benefits, off my memory. So that's how we've looked at it, and so far we've been pretty good at coming to an agreement.
Yep.
I would like to make a motion, Mayor. I move to approve the establishment of a neighborhood enterprise zone at 1200 West 9 Mile Road, and to authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the proposed neighborhood enterprise zone agreement as submitted by the CED director.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Mikulski.
Polika,
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
Leaks May,
Yes.
Piana.
Yes. Thank you for Lido Group for
Thank you.
ushering this through.
We'll be starting in the spring. Appreciate you. Thank you for the time.
All right, we are at the end of our regular agenda and moving on to call to council and handing it over to the city manager for department updates.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I'm going to begin with the most thrilling topic from our finance director, Phil Whitfield. Dazzle us, Phil.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. With the holidays comes winter taxes. So our winter taxes have been prepared. They are currently with the printer. They will be mailed out this Wednesday, the 29th. They should be hitting mailboxes around December 1st, on or around December 1st. quick note, if you've had any address changes, anything that was changed after November 2nd will not be on this tax bill that's going out because we have to run those tables prior to that date. So if you have any address changes, we'll have to handle those after these bills go out. But the payments will be due anytime between now and the end of the year. We won't be able to accept payments prior to December 1st. After December 1st, we will be able to take your money. But that's just the biggest update as far as the tax, the tax bill that's going out. Also, just a preface for the next council meeting, we will be presenting the annual audit. At this point, I'm just doing some follow-up with the auditors now, but the report should be in our hot little hands within the next week or so. And we will be reviewing that prior to the actual council meeting on the 18th, but the full presentation from Maynard will take place on that day as well. Any questions on either of those items?
If I may, through the chair, is there anything council needs to do regarding that audit? I seem to remember an email, something regarding that, but it was, unless there was an issue, correct?
Yeah, only if there's an
Okay.
issue. There's
All
no
right.
action that will be required. They'll just be presenting the audit report in its entirety to council and for the transparency for the city. Yep.
And a note for the future council, we will be resuming mid-year budget adjustments or the second quarter adjustments through December, and those will be brought to the new council in January for updating. Next is our DPW Director, James Jameson. Some know him as Jim. I know him as both.
So, a couple quick updates. Project update, Woodward Construction, 9 and Camborne are both, have two-way traffic. Marshall should be following this week, allowing two-way traffic there, so those detours at the major intersections will all be removed. There will still be some structure adjustments that are still curing, so there will be some barricades blocking off those, but there will be enough room at all for 2 lanes of traffic. Striping will continue throughout the week. Signage installation begins Wednesday. Construction materials and equipment are being removed. So that's site cleanup for Merlot and Ajax as they close up. Double lane closures have been extended until 12/15 to do any of the remaining cleanup and protect the crews while they're working on the roadway. Crosswalks, have some pictures came in with crosswalks that are off-center. Those are on MDOT's punch list, and those will be addressed by PK striping. That's about it for Woodward Construction.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since it's snowing,
Yep.
you're saying for the middle of December, construction would end, even with snow delays? Might that change? Could that change? Magic 8 balls?
There's only so many things that you can do in December. So there are some things that could still be done in December, but if they're not off the roadway by December 15th, there will be things that cannot be completed until spring.
Okay, and I guess we would find out at our last council meeting what those
Yeah,
items are.
there's another MDOT progress meeting on the 6th, which I believe is next Wednesday at 1 p.m. So we will be asking for more clarification on timeline at that point.
Okay. It would be helpful if you would email council with any updates prior to our meeting on the 18th or the 15th, because we are all getting asked about what's happening, I think, a little bit more frequently because it's winter, and the barrels are still up, and what the timing is, and what might get kicked to the springtime.
And through the chair, I had just a quick question about the crosswalks that are off-center. Are you referring to the ones that have the striping that were kind of herky-jerky?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you translate that?
That's
as
just
a
my-
visual. A visual.
I think it's,
So the stripes didn't all line up at the end?
Oh, the zebra stripes.
Kind of curving around.
Okay.
My question was about the crosswalks that have a concrete bit that extends out into the path. So you'll have your crosswalk that you're at, and then the crosswalk away from you, but it kind of kinks off to the side and there's a concrete bit in front of it. I don't know how to explain it
Is that at
properly.
like 9 Mile?
Yes, we have one at 9 Mile, and I walked up and down Woodward and basically took pictures of them. Do those have a purpose? They feel intentional.
Yeah, at the major intersections, those are referred to as bump outs, and those are meant to protect bicycle traffic from automobile traffic. So
Also
it's
slow
this,
down turning cars.
Yep.
Going right. So rather than a wider turn radius for speeding, it forces drivers to slow down on their turn. And so they're approaching the side streets or the intersection, going slower.
So with the pathway narrowing, so the pedestrian pathway goes from wide to very narrow in that bump out. That's normal as well.
Yes.
Cool, great.
Yes, these are all new safety features that we'll be learning together how to use. I think maybe we'll need a refresher on how to explain it too, probably in the springtime. I know the comms team has some communications in terms of how to use this going forward, but hard to roll out when it's snowing and under construction, when it's not all down.
Through the chair. I have a question, but to your point, I understand what you're saying is because that little bit that's right at the end, when you have festivals, people are going to be tripping over that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was my fear.
Yeah. So I've been asked if, when the construction's done, are we going to have those concrete barriers on Woodward the same as they have them on 9 Mile and Oak Park?
no, that's not part of the plan.
Okay. I think we need them more than 9 Mile needs them.
Yeah, it could go both ways. I've talked to Oak Park a little bit about those, and there's definitely a trade-off. I mean, it may be worth it for the protection, but there's a trade-off because they've already had a few of those hit by vehicles, like the day they were installed. You can do certain things like that, but it wasn't part of this project, obviously. I would assume
Through
at a
the
later
chair,
date.
I can also speak, I was in the meetings, MDOT wasn't prepared to enable that for this
Yeah.
first phase.
I think there's been, one way to think about it is good, better, best. We are getting good with the money that we were able to afford under this grant to put down good safety improvements. Better and best over time. Our bike lanes in Ferndale started with a white stripe, right? And then we went to a double white stripe. And then we went to delineators, which are the white sticks that reflect. And now Pleasant Ridge is putting in better. We got good, they got better for a small portion because that was the entree onto the 696 interchange. Best is when you do have protected bike lanes with a barrier, not just sticks and parking, which is ours, which is good. So good, better, best and we got good. And this council and the future council will have to negotiate with MDOT how to get better and learn from this investment and how that might interact with future transit infrastructure investment. Hey, who do you know in that space? I will be a friend and working with cities on that type of future better, best infrastructure, if that helps at all.
Anything else?
Through the chair, one last thing.
Yes.
And this is partly to you, but also partly to our Director of Communications, Kara. Can we, since I had the question about are these bump outs intentional, and is the pedestrian pathway narrowing also intentional? Can we get a communications piece that explains the why behind some of this?
The answer is yes. And actually, so right, there she is, yeah. Riley's actually the one who's managing this content, but we have a plan. She has a plan for the next month to get us through. So we've been riding that fine line between putting things out, knowing that we have these kind of shifting deadlines and we want to make sure that we're timing everything correctly. So we're following a 4-week plan here. That is part of it. That would be kind of like the why behind what you're seeing, what they're going to be doing, but we're going to keep it pretty base level. And then we're working with the police department to do a much more comprehensive education plan in the early spring. That would include like a public event where people can come out and, you know, get to learn about these things. Some of our police department have been through a class that would help with a lot of this. So it's a 2-part situation, but the answer is yes. And then there's more coming.
Great, thank you. Just want to ask you another question, just to keep you up here for a little bit longer.
I'm sure we'll have some about leaf pickup, so we can move on to that. The leaf schedule, this should be the last week. It will be the last week that DPW is picking it up at the curb. We're on top of it. We started in the northwest corner today. This week, just as a reminder, we're doing the entire city. We started in the northwest corner. We're going to move down south, and then we'll go east across Woodward. We should be there on Thursday, and then assuming everything goes as planned, Friday will just be a catch-up. We'll kind of get any errant piles that came out after we had already made a pass, and then do some street sweeping. After that, so beginning next week, lawn bags can still be placed at the curb. Those can be placed at the curb until the 15th. Outside of that, in between December 15th and the first week of April, typically, you can take lawn bags to Sacra's transfer yard in Coolidge, Troy Street, City of Troy, 995 Coolidge Road. Yeah, so you can take your stuff there. You can drop it off for free. You used to have to make an appointment. Now you don't have to. You can just bring it there with your driver's license or ID. Sacra, SOCRRA.org, actually has a pretty good website that will help you not only take in items like that, but it'll help you with other materials that you can't leave at the curb or recycle at home. And Ferndale's website has a zero waste page that has links to Sacra. I think it's called Refuse Wizard, that will tell you anywhere to take anything you need. And that's about it. Are there any questions on residential leaf pickup?
Oh, you got a lot of overlap right now. I hope you don't get a lot of snow.
Oh, yeah, we hope so too. Thanks, Council.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Jimmy Jam. Next, we have the heart of tonight's messages. Robert Bursch, Deputy Parks and Rec Director. Fun topics.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just a few announcements, or a couple of announcements from Parks and Rec Department. We are pleased to announce, Parks and Rec along with DDA, we are pleased to announce that Santa is coming to Ferndale. And he will be at Schiffer Park this Saturday, December 2nd, from 2 to 4 at Schiffer Park. There will be s'mores, arts and crafts, cookies, pictures with Santa. You can jam with music from DJ Luke. But before he stops at Schiffer, he'll be making a special guest appearance at Geary Park and at Wilson Park. And so those will be from 1 to 1:15 at Wilson. Then he'll stroll on over to the west side to Geary from 1:15, and then make that final stop at Schiffer Park, where all the fun is going to take place. Our second announcement is that an RFP has been published for our Wilson Park improvement projects. Interested contractors have until December 20th at 2 p.m. to submit their bids for those parks improvement projects. That's all that I have for Parks and Rec. Are there any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks for inviting Santa into town.
Next, our HR Director, Dan Jacy, will just give a brief update on recruitment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to give you an update on recruitment for the year. This year, we have filled or promoted people to 20 full-time positions. The latest positions filled are Program Specialist in Parks and Rec. Logan started today. Zero Waste System Manager with an expected start date of December 4th. The Assistant City Manager position open house is scheduled for November 29th of this year. The Facilities and Fleet Manager open house is scheduled for December 6th. Additionally, we have 2 open inspector positions in CED. That posting will end on December 4th. We have some good candidates in the pipeline for that. We have 1 police record specialist position, and that posting will close on December 17th. In addition to those, we have 4 open police officer positions and 2 open firefighter positions. And finally, we will be recruiting for the police communication liaison position beginning tomorrow. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Justin Giorlando, who is the primary point of contact and the coordinator for all of our recruiting efforts, because this is a huge undertaking and there's been a lot of work this year.
Thanks, Dan, for all your work, and Justin's.
Thank you, Dan, and that's a nice segue into my own updates. Justin is part of the Finance Committee, and we continue to meet. We'll be meeting again this Thursday at City Hall. These are all open public meetings, and all of the records and videos are available on the city's website for view. We last met on November 9th, and we went in depth on priority-based budgeting and how the city could walk through various cost scenarios depending on revenues. So there was a good discussion and a good just example of the decision points that they're being tasked to work through. This week, we'll talk a little bit more about cost scenario using the priority-based budgeting approach. And then we will shift into beginning to explore potential millage opportunities or no millage opportunities and what those look like. So that will be just a bit of exploration this Thursday. Want to remind everybody that in December, we only have 1 city council meeting date, but we do have 2 meetings that date. We'll meet December 18th at 6 p.m., and then we'll meet again at 7 p.m., and at 6 p.m. is when we will receive the financial audit results from our financial auditor. And that's all. Mayor, back to you.
Actually, if I may, through the chair. This person didn't come up, but I do have a question. So Bruce, do you do a report? Because I have a question for you. For me? Yes. Yes. So you spoke and gave a great presentation about the new parking system. And my question to you is, will there be some opportunity for some sort of training for our individuals who are not quite used to using systems like this? And I ask this because it's almost a given that I run into a senior at our current parking system kiosks that are just like, forget it, I don't know how to do it, and I just have to kind of help them. Is there going to be some sort of hands-on, other than just reading it? Is there maybe something that can be rolled out to kind of give people?
Well, I think that during our initial rollout of the program, typically what we do, we have some ambassadors or people out talking to people as they're using the system to explain to them, especially for this particular rollout, text to pay will be new. Just talking to people about how to use it and creating some handouts and flyers to talk about that, as well as the discussion we had with the DDA and the in our city communications. But on that specific point, as we go through the implementation planning for this, we can focus on that to come up with ways to better communicate to seniors and people who are challenged with the new technology.
If you do need volunteers, a volunteers tribute, because I'm doing it anyway when we're out there anyhow.
Okay.
Just
yeah,
so you know.
yeah. But we will be conscious of
All
that.
right.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna bring it on over to council, call to council updates. I guess I'll start with the left side tonight.
I actually have nothing this meeting, Mayor.
All right,
I don't have anything right now, Mayor. Thank you,
okay,
though.
making it easy.
Yeah, let's make that 3. I have nothing additional tonight.
Okay. I just want to remind people to shovel their sidewalks. I don't think the 1-inch snow tonight will last on our sidewalks, but this is something I get complaints about, and I know council does, when people don't shovel. It's just that time of season again. And please be courteous and kind, help out your neighbor, and shovel your sidewalks with snow. All right, with that, we will see you at the last city council meeting on December of the year, for December 18th, right? On the 18th. That's 3 weeks away, so enjoy your time, and we'll see you then.